If you use AI to create apps and software, then you have to deal with a lot of text because AI tends to produce these very long design briefs and also explanations of your code. So it can be quite tiresome to read through all of this AI generated text. And this is where the Infranodus Graph View extension that you can use in your favorite IDE can be super helpful because it visualizes the content of your text or markdown files as a graph. It can also visualize your code base, by the way, and then show you the main topical clusters inside so that you can quickly understand what those design briefs are actually talking about. And then it allows you to zoom in very quickly onto the topics that you find interesting and then develop them further by using the built-in AI inside this graph view. So for example, if I want to see what this topical cluster is talking about, I simply click it, and then I click Summarize Selected Topic, and then it will give me a very brief but concise and clear idea of what this particular topical cluster in this documentation is about. So it's a really quick way to understand the main topics and to read through them. And on top of that, if you have, like I have here, for instance, a description of how my code base functions, I can also use the gaps feature that helps me identify a gaps or like a blind spot that AI actually missed in this documentation. And then I can generate a question instead of summary here that will then produce for me a very nice overview of how I can improve this blind spot by addressing some concerns. And then I simply copy and paste it into my favorite AI agent, and then it finds a solution. So it's a really nice workflow that I use myself for my own tool, Infranodus, actually the one that I developed here. And so I want to share it with you in this video because I think it's super interesting and helpful to use it. So if you're interested, keep watching and I will demonstrate how it works. So first of all, let me actually start from a simpler use case where I have a new app that I'm working on, which is a kind of like a trading app. And I have a design brief here that was generated by my AI agent. And so it has a description of the platform, how it's going to work and so on. And actually I haven't worked on this project for a month. So if I want to remind myself what I was actually working on, it's a great way to do that. I simply right click this design brief file that was generated by AI instead of reading it. And then I click Infranodus, visualize as a graph. And then this whole content here is shown to me as a graph. I can see the main topics. So I can understand very quickly that it's talking about asset dynamics, data scrapping, journal management, strategy testing. So already, because I know what this project is about, this is a very good visual summary of the main ideas inside. It directly reminds me what it should be about and what I should focus on. Actually, I have more information here on the different clusters. And then once I understand what it's about, my favorite thing to do is to actually look at the latent smaller topics. You can extend this view a little bit and see what are the latent topics. And for example, I see that real-time alerts is a very small cluster here, but it's actually quite important. I remember now. So I zoom in onto this cluster, right? And then I ask it to show me what are the different statements where I'm talking about that. So here it retrieves the specific statements that relate to this topical cluster from this design brief so that I can understand a little bit better. Okay, so it's talking about how the app is actually giving me these notifications to ensure that alerts aren't missed, how they work through the browser, through WebSocket and so on. And then I can even ask the built-in AI to summarize this cluster. So I just select summarize here and then click summarize. And then it's going to use the built-in AI module. In this case, it's GPT 5.4 to generate a summary of this cluster and give me an idea of what I was actually talking about. So it's a really great way to navigate through your documentation in a non-linear way and then to explore it and to also see what are the aspects of your app that you could develop further and how to make this documentation more coherent. Another very good example is actually the Infranodus app itself, which I had here, because what I have here is a documentation of two features with the new 3D graph visualization inside the main application of Infranodus and how the different AI actions work in there. And so here it provides me a visualization of the content, just like we did in the previous case. But what's interesting here is that I can switch to the gaps, and then it will show me the gaps between the different topics. So the blind spots that the documentation is not maybe covering quite well. So there are all these different clusters, but some of them don't have very good connections. And so usually looking at those gaps can actually provide me with a much better idea of how I can develop this documentation further, and also show me some inconsistencies in this documentation. So for example, here, what I did previously, I identified this gap between AI actions and state management, and then I simply went into the AI question topical gap tool here, and then the built-in AI generated for me a question, or it's also a prompt that actually challenged some of the aspects of how these particular features are implemented. And then I took this prompt, I copied it and pasted it into my agent, and it generated a really nice outline of how I can fix a certain feature inside this application that was causing bugs. So it was really great because it identified the gap, then it generated a prompt, a question, and then I simply pasted this question into my AI agent, and it generated for me some possible implementation, which I can read through or put through other agents, and then make sure that it's all done well, and then implement it into the software. So you see, this graph becomes like a very convenient way to navigate through your software documentation. And you actually can also use it on software itself. So for instance, if let's say I have some module like AI chat here, I can actually click visualize this as a graph. And what happens here is that it will visualize for me the actual code base here with all the functions, all the different variables and so on. So it becomes also like a very nice way to navigate through code itself. This is quite a long file, so it takes a bit of time. But you will see here that first on the topical view, it just shows me what this actual file module is about. It's about chat management, AI generation, context update. So this is really clear, right? And then I can say like, all right, if I'm interested in AI generation, I simply click here, and then it shows me all the different elements of this cluster. So for example, gap depth is something that I'm interested in. I can simply select it and then click on search, and it's going to show me exactly in this file where this variable parameter name is used, right? So I can quickly jump to the specific aspects of this code base that are important. So it's a really great way to navigate through the code base that is maybe written by somebody else, or that is written by AI, or that you wrote yourself a long time ago, just to remind yourself what it's about and how it works. It's very good because, like, if I want to work on this particular aspect of this tool, like the gap depth, how deep in the gaps this AI module goes, I jump directly to the part where it shows me where this variable is taken from, and then I can simply reiterate through this and see where it's actually set and how I can adjust it and so on. So this becomes also a really nice way to navigate through your code base and to find some really interesting ways to kind of enter into the functions that you wouldn't otherwise have. So this is what you get in this topical view, and it's very convenient to use. So like I said, you can use it for your documentation, for your design briefs like I did here, just to get like a general overview of the main ideas inside and to jump into them. You can use it to also find some particular mentions of certain things, like if I'm interested in DFA asset, I simply click here, and then it shows me all the places inside this doc where those DFA and assets are mentioned. So you see, I can quickly jump to the parts that I need here in documentation. Super helpful for reading through documentation. And I can also use it on my gaps, like I showed you here, where I visualize the actual content of the docs, but to find the blind spots. So this I do on the gaps, and then I reload through the gaps and find the gaps that should be bridged, and that will make my documentation and also my code more coherent. And then I can also test it against various problems that it might have, right? And then I can also use it on the actual code itself by right-clicking and then visualizing the files with the code themselves in order to explore the code base itself. So I find this very helpful. I hope that you try using it on your own AI-generated code or your own code, and let me know what you think about it, if you find it helpful, what you find it useful for. And if you want to install this extension, it's super simple. You just go to the extension store and then you search for Infranodus here, and then it will find you Infranodus in the marketplace. You install it. The only thing is that when it installs it, it usually shows it on the left. So what you have to do is to click Command-Shift-P, and then you choose a View, Move View function, and then you choose Infranodus here. It will be somewhere there, graph, and then you just tell it to move to secondary sidebar, all right? Because normally it shows on the left. So when you move it to the right, then it's just going to show on the right, and it's very convenient because you can switch between your AI agents here, your graph view, or you can use it also with Claude and Terminal. So it's a very good setup that's quite helpful. As you can see already, 4,600 people downloaded it, so you can be one of them. Has 3 stars. That's because of very few ratings, and also it had some bugs before, but now we fixed them. So I hope you use it and you give it a rating that it deserves. And also, if you have any wishes for how it should work, some functionalities it should have, please let me know, because it really turns your IDE into some sort of Obsidian-like tool, and it's really useful actually. So thank you, and see you next time.